And I want to say this to the television audience. I made my mistakes. But in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent. And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. And I think, too, that I can say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
President?
Yes.
In 1974, the 37th President of the United States, Richard Milhouse Nixon, was tried in the Supreme Court, which is better known as United States versus Nixon, a landmark case discussing the power and limitations of executive privilege. This case arose from the Watergate scandal, one of the biggest political scandals in American history, which occurred in June of 1972. The Watergate scandal occurred at the Democratic National Committee's Watergate headquarters. 5 burglars were found in an attempt to switch defective microphones with new ones in order to spy on the Democratic Party. Frank Wills, a security guard working late nights at the Watergate headquarters, noticed the locks on the doors were tampered with masking tape and investigated. Frank then noticed and apprehended the 5 burglars: Virgilio Gonzalez, Bernard Barker, James W., McCord Jr., Eugene Martinez, and Frank Sturgis. But it was not immediately clear that they were working for the president at the time. It wasn't until June 3rd of 1973, after Nixon's landslide re-election, that it was confirmed that the president was involved with the Watergate scandal. John Weasley Dean, an attorney who served the White House counsel during Nixon's second presidential term, was the person to expose Nixon's involvement in the matter after confessing that they have discussed the scandal numerous times. Then on July 13th of the same year, Deputy Assistant Alexander Butterfield revealed that Nixon had a taping system in the Oval Office. The president refused to release the tapes up until April 30th of 1974, after he had been subpoenaed 12 days beforehand. But the tapes released only edited transcripts of the legitimate tapes, which left the Senate Watergate Committee unsatisfied. Nixon and his attorney argued that the doctrine obligated the government to prevent the judicial branch from interfering with the executive branch. On July 24, 1974, 16 days after the oral arguments began, the Supreme Court came to a unanimous decision. Nixon and his attorney believed that the doctrine obligated the government to prevent the judicial branch from interfering with the executive branch. On July 24, 1974, 16 days after the oral arguments began, the Supreme Court came to a unanimous decision declaring that Nixon must hand over the tapes. They brought up the Marbury v. Madison case, stating that it is the duty of the Judicial Department to state what the law is. After 2 weeks of the Supreme Court's decision, Richard Nixon resigned and was pardoned by Vice President, who would then become President after Nixon's resignation, Gerald Ford. The importance of this case is argued by many. Many people believe removing a crooked president from office was the most important part of this historic case. Others argue that knowing that a president does not have supreme power is more important. Another argument made is that checks and balances does work in our government system. In reality, it is more likely a combination of all three. Knowing that our government, even at the highest level, will be corrected or removed for wrongdoing, means that America is heading in a successful direction.
This is the 37th time I have spoken to you from this office, where so many decisions have been made that shape the history of this nation. Each time I have done so to discuss with you some matter that I believe affected the national interest. In all the decisions I have made in my public life, I have always tried to do what was best for the nation. Throughout the long and difficult period of Watergate, I have felt it was my duty to persevere, to make every possible effort to complete the term of office to which you elected me. In the past few days, however, it has become evident to me that I no longer have a strong enough political base in the Congress to justify continuing that effort. As long as there was such a base, I felt strongly that it was necessary to see the constitutional process through to its conclusion, that to do otherwise would be unfaithful to the spirit of that deliberately difficult process and a dangerously destabilizing precedent for the future. But with the disappearance of that base, I now believe that the constitutional purpose has been served, and there is no longer a need for the process to be prolonged. I would have preferred to carry through to the finish, whatever the personal agony it would have involved. And my family unanimously urged me to do so. But the interests of the nation must always come before any personal considerations. From the discussions I have had with congressional and other leaders, I have concluded that because of the Watergate matter, I might not have the support of the Congress that I would consider necessary to back the very difficult decisions and carry out the duties of this office in the way the interests of the nation will require. I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress, particularly at this time with problems we face at home and abroad. To continue to fight through the months ahead for my personal vindication would almost totally absorb the time and attention of both the President and the Congress in a period when our entire focus should be on the great issues of peace abroad and prosperity without inflation at home. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.